Hey, I'm Nick, and in this video, I talk with Greg Curtis of Eastside Christian Church all about how to help guests get connected to our churches online. So in the video, Greg talks about his framework for helping guests connect, whether it's in person or online. He talks about one place, one program, two processes, two placements. That'll make a lot more sense when you watch the video. But we also talk about how online they had to change some things to help encourage guests to sign up, to give their information. It was different, obviously, online. So he talks about 3 ways that they're using to help guests sign up and give their information. And then he talks about the 7 things that they changed with their Next Steps class because it was online. Like, what are the things they had to change to make it compelling and helpful online? And then a bonus one that they figured out that would help them train. So if you like this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. These are part of a series of videos that are kind of bonus content for the new digital church course. That's a course helping churches, apply online strategies and tactics to their church in order to reach and connect with more people online. And you can find out all about that and the links and everything in the description below. But let's check out this interview with Greg Curtis. Well, hey, I'm Nick, and I'm here with my friend Greg Curtis. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, Nick. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. So, Greg, give us an introduction. Tell us about you and your family and your church.
Well, I've been at my church in some form or another since I was 14 years old. We moved from LA to Orange County and found Eastside, and it grew from 800 people to 2,200 by the time I graduated from high school. Saw so much life change at close range that it changed my career path, felt a call into ministry. And by the time I graduated with a degree in church growth, Eastside was starting its second of 6 daughter churches. And I went to start that one, and I was there for 27 years. The last 17 as the senior pastor of that church. And then as we had facility issues, and as Gene Apple returned to Eastside, he had been an intern when I was in high school, believe it or not, and he lived at my house. So we've known each other a long time. But when he came back, Eastside started having facility issues, and they grew out of their facility. And the short story is, after 27 years, we re-merged the churches at a new location in between the two. So we moved into that 7 years ago. And when we did, the church combined attendance was 3,200. And before the quarantine, here we are in, this is 2000, what are we?
20 in August? Yeah.
How can I forget that this is 2020 of all
Because
years?
it's quarantine and COVID. That's why. Like every day is a year and every year is a day.
Yeah. So here we are in 2020, and just before the quarantine hit, we were 12,000 campus wide. So going from 3,200 to 12,000 before quarantine in a 7-year period of time, the need to connect people well was priority one, and that ended up my position. I mean, that was what it was that God called me to when we remerged the churches. And I have been on all 6 cylinders ever since. I love connecting people and helping with that and developing those strategies. So that's what I do. My family, I have a wife, Michelle, and I have 3 adult kids. I've got a son, Chase, and a daughter, Kendra, and a daughter, Carly. They're all very artistic. A couple of them have art businesses, but my youngest is on her way to becoming a psychologist. She's in her master's program. So that's us.
Awesome. Yeah. And you're like, to me, you're like the church assimilation guy, right? That's how we got connected. Somebody on our staff was searching for some things, found your site, which is really helpful. And that led to our, you and I talking, and then we struck up a friendship. And like, you're the person I go to when I want to know, like, how are you connecting people? How are you taking people from having attended the church to fully connected, serving, plugged into a group like this is their home? Because you guys have done that so well. And we're going to talk about how to do that digitally. Like, what does that look like online? But first, I'd love to start with, share with us your kind of simple framework that you guys have used and you help other churches when it comes to taking somebody from attending to connected and plugged in.
Well, if I grounded in what I shared earlier in the growth of Eastside and being able to try to chase that train a little bit, I said sometimes you feel like in ministry, like you've got a bit in your mouth and you're trying to pull the train down the track. And then there are other times when you feel like you're holding on to the back of the caboose and your legs are flying in the air. And it's pretty much been that way for the last 7 years. And so as we've done that, and we've seen great, not just growth, but great connection stats, during that time, that people just started turning to me and asking, they would ask Gene, how do you get them there? And Greg, how do you keep them there? And the calls, because maybe we'd be published in a magazine or something, you just get all these calls. And I didn't even have time to handle that. So I created this website, gregcurtis-assimilation.com, that's really climbing the Assimilayas. We'll explain that later. But I just started putting little posts of learnings, and that's how we got connected, of things that we would learn along the way to do this well, because that way I could share links and not necessarily have long conversations with all of the people. I could actually give them a resource to run with and not do a mini seminar over and over, right? So
Yeah.
I did that, and that kind of has done into other things that now I do for other churches. But one of the learnings, as I started working with churches really in 7 different countries, and churches as small as 30 people and as large as 22,000, I started asking myself the question, what is the commonalities, regardless of size and culture, of a successful or effective assimilation strategy, that connects people well to the church. And so I came up with 4 things that I was seeing universally. One was, I call it one place, one program, 2 processes, 2 placements. That's what I see in the churches that are doing it well. One place, one program, 2 processes, 2 placements. And what that means is they're sending guests just one place. There's just one ask of guests. And usually it's to get their contact information so you can build a relationship with them. So you can have that privilege. And usually it's in exchange for some kind of gift or giveaway. So there's one place, which leads to one program, some environment that they've created where guests get connected to the church. And that one program automatically, by attending it, puts them into 2 processes: their small group placement and ministry team volunteer placement, basically process. And the end game of those 2 processes are the 2 placements. That means assimilation is complete, not spiritual growth or discipleship, but assimilation is complete. The 2 placements are they're in a small group and they're serving on a ministry team that fits their unique shape and calling. So the assimilation is the journey of a first-time guest to becoming a connected serving member, connected small group, serving, volunteering. Once they're there, they're in that environment, you can lead them anywhere and grow them in any way that you want. But that's when connection is complete. Because small groups say you're wanted, and ministry teams say you're needed. And you need both to get somebody to stick long term.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the more connections they make, right, the better they're going to stick, and that's going to be their home and all of that. And I love that framework, that one place, one program, and 2 processes, 2 placements. Now, obviously online, that changes, and you experienced that when COVID-19 shut down in-person services. All of a sudden, online, you weren't necessarily sending them to one place. And there is a program, and we're going to talk about how you adapted your program. But what are some of the things you learned to be able to get guests to give you their information that's different? It was different online than it was when you were in person. So what I
begin to understand is that guests will share their contact with you online a little differently, and sometimes a lot of differently than they did before when they were physically present. So the 3 reasons why they'll share their contact with you, or the 3 ways is for a giveaway, which is what we did before, for a reason, and for an answer, okay? And so what that means is this: we started by just adopting a giveaway, but we realized we needed to do it digitally. So we started giving away $5 Amazon gift cards. And so we were a church at that time that on an average weekend, maybe 85 people would give us their contact info for a weekend, a lot bigger for big weekends like Easter, Christmas, that kind of thing. But, on an average weekend, that. And so we started doing $5 Amazon gift cards, and it started with 40 people making themselves known. Then it just kind of went down to 25 to 35. And, so much less numbers for this gift. And of course, that gift was double the cost of our giveaway that we got so much of a higher volume to. But, part of that kind of thing made us realize that it's not just a giveaway that people will do that for, especially when your giveaways, it may be double the cost for a $5 Amazon gift card, but how valuable is a $5 Amazon gift card?
Sure, yeah, $5.
And what is Amazon gift card? Yeah, what does an Amazon gift card have to do with the experience they had at church? Because we give
Yeah.
away an orange tumbler that has Eastside swag, had some homemade cookies in it. That's what we used to do. So they were walking, you know, when you come in, you saw all these people walking around with this orange cup. You saw big piles of, you know, like pyramids of them on counters, and there's slides of them, you know, and come go get yours, you know, at Guest Central afterwards. And so it was part of the experience. But when you're online, that's not just part of the experience, but neither is an Amazon gift card. And what do? Buy a roll of toilet paper for $5? You know, it was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
not that pivotal, you know, more so at the beginning, but definitely diminishing after that, right? So the second thing
Yeah.
is a reason. And we begin to, what I mean by a reason is this was something people had to do to be a part of whatever you're doing. And so they would give them their contact info for that reason. And it wasn't necessarily even targeted at guests. And this is what I mean. We do 21 days of prayer. A lot of churches have been inspired by Church of the Highlands to do that. So we usually do it in August, but we upped it to starting the day after Easter this year because of the quarantine. And our pastor had a daily 4-minute video that was going to come out with that, with a kind of a prayer guide for each day of the 21 days. So if you want that delivered to your inbox, just let us know. And we had it was also on social media. So most of the church knew they were just going to get it off social media. But 1,000 people signed up to get it on Easter to start the next day. For that reason, they signed up to receive the email, gave us their email information, their name, whatever. And on the back end, when we plugged them into our database, we saw that 295 of them were first-time guests. We'd never had their information before.
Which is
So,
awesome. Yeah, that's great. You would never expect a third of it to be new guest, or almost a third
yeah.
to be guests. But this, to me, that's like, well, this was a good opportunity. You probably had a backlog of people who didn't tell you they were there, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Yeah, I'll tell you now because I'm
And
interested."
I'll tell you now, not because I'm a guest and you're going to give me a welcome gift. I'll tell you now because I want to do this thing with you guys that everybody's doing.
Mm-hmm.
In order to
Yeah.
do it, I need to give you my email, but that's okay because everybody else is giving you their email. And I'll do that. And that way I get this daily video. And of course, remember in the early days of the quarantine, people were really feeling the need to stay connected. So in some way, and that really worked for a reason. Well, then later on, it kind of evolved that we realized that people will also give you their info for an answer. For instance, you could have things on your website when people are searching, you know, maybe for a church or to get a question answered, they have to give you their contact. If they want to text, it's their phone. If it's an email, they have to give you their email address. And to get the answer that they want, it's just a natural thing to get it. Maybe it's to be on a list to find out more about X, Y, or Z. And this is currently amplifying to some new thoughts. So this is just way new here. You heard it first here with Nick, kind of thing. But the idea that kind of our learning about the 21 days of prayer after Easter is that what if we just create a free mini course, like I'm going to make this up, a 15-minute video that maybe has a PDF, and maybe it's about how to COVID-proof your finances in 2020 by the end of 2020, and it's what the Bible says about that. And you have one of your you know, maybe your leaders of Financial Peace University, who in our case is now doing Financial Peace University online, but they get a free. And if that's what the sermon series is about, you know, kind of like what we were doing the 21 days of prayer. If the sermon series is about money, you do one of those. If it's about parenting, you do one of those. If it's about marriage, then you do one of those. If it's about anxiety, then you do one of those. And you just collect these and you offer them for free. And then people have to, you know, they'll give you their email address to get that. They'll watch a 10, 15-minute mini course with a PDF resource. And in the meantime, now you could actually, if you wanted to, get guest leads from people who don't even come to the service, because you could put that on Instagram, you could put it on Facebook, you could run ads, you could promote them. And you're collecting guest leads who were engaging with you over a specific topic, and you can create a track that, say, in the case of the finances, goes straight to an invitation to Financial Peace University online, and they meet new people, and the ask at the end can be now to go to next step. So what we found is that the journey from getting their contact information the first time and them coming to your online environment for connecting them overall to the church, it may be a longer journey now with multiple steps, and it might be tracked based on why they gave you their information. And so that's because they want answers. So really, there's a gift, there's that they'll give you the information for, but also a reason, like I want to be a part of this thing, or an answer to an issue or a question they have. All three of those things can result in a new person giving you their contact information. And if you have designed a good engagement path and follow-up system afterwards, the thing now is not content, but engagement. Find excuses to talk to people, to email them back, to text them back, to, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's something we can all implement. Yeah, that totally makes sense because, and I think and you and I may have talked about this before, but one of the challenges online is that you're seeing people earlier in the journey, I guess would be a way to say it. So like when they showed up in person, in some ways that was step 20 on their journey, not step 1. Usually they've heard about it. They visited the website, they checked out social media, they watched the service for 8 weeks. So when they show up in person, they're like already a little more willing to take a bigger step. Whereas online, you get them step 1. I mean, they might watch a service. That might be the second thing they did. They came to the site, they browsed it, they watched the service. So calling them to do something like to give you their information feels a lot bigger of a request on step 3 than it did when they were already in person, which was probably step 20. You know what I mean? So I like that you're thinking about what are some other ways we can encourage people to identify, give you their information, make that, because we do need more options. The one place isn't the same anymore because online they could watch a service that's already happened, right? Weeks ago. They could be watching a live service where you're in the chat and there's a chance to connect there. They could be watching that mini course. Like there's just a lot of different ways that they could find themselves, giving you their information if they take that step. So I think that makes sense.
Well, you're mentioning what I call the Netflix culture, where people will now binge watch a sermon series from a church.
Totally. Yeah.
We've all become aware of other churches and what they're offering. And so by doing so, people are trying out other things. And it doesn't mean necessarily that they're leaving their church and going to another one, but they're exposed to more resources at more churches, right? And so there's this idea that there is a kind of a Netflix culture that's binge watching a sermon. Well, do you have something on your page that says, if it's a series on, again, let's say anxiety, do you struggle with anxiety? There's a survey here that you could take a survey, and by virtue of sending it, it's you've got their contact info. Or we have a resource for you that I think would be helpful. Would you like some more resources on anxiety? Click here, and we'll send those to you, and it'll be email. I mean, literally, you need to think about those kinds of things in order to get contact info to build a relationship.
Yeah, because there was the service and they're there and you can send them to one place, right? Where you're going to try to get that contact information. Is it a card? Is it a new here area where you get a gift? And that's great. Now there's more opportunities, just like you said, because they could go binge watch that series that was 6 months ago. So where on that page or in those videos, are they getting called to that action to take a step and give their information? Absolutely. In addition to live and all of that? For sure. That's great. And I think we do have to do a better job there, because I think what you experienced in your church, 85 new people a week telling you they're there, down to 45 to 25, whatever it was there, by the way, before I forget this, as you started to realize there are more ways you could encourage people to identify essentially and tell you they're there and give you information, did that bring the trend back up a little bit? Like, did you start to see a little bit more guests?
Right now is hot off the press. We are now agreeing that this is the new way we want to go. And so we are creating those. So results TBD.
We'll see.
But we have found that when we've tried to go back to the giveaway, which we've done that and mail our orange cup to people, that now that it's like 10 a week for the giveaway thing currently on the online. And that's and there's things like there's a sense of immediacy when somebody's on your campus and you can exchange your information for this cool gift that you see in front of your face and you go home with it. But what about if it's something that you're going to get in the mail 5 to 7 days later? Do I really want them to have my contact info? Because I know they're going to fill my inbox with something. They're going to send stuff. So is it really worth it? And then, in our case, we had this orange cup that really, when you're there physically, it just shines and everybody wants one. But when you see it on a screen or you see it on a web page, it's not as sexy.
It's not as compelling.
It's plastic.
Yeah.
So I want to
Those
give my
home baked cookies don't smell as good.
yes, no cookies in them, obviously, and it's a plastic
Yeah.
cup that I'll get in 5 to 7 days. You know what I'm saying? And
Yep.
also, again, it's not part of their experience, so they don't associate it with their time with you online. And it's just, these are the things that we're learning. What do they associate? You were talking about a topic or a truth that is impacting my soul or my relationships in some way or my family in some way. I want more. That's where you get their contact info.
Yeah. Well, once we get that contact info, and now we're talking about how we can get it multiple ways and through different avenues and for different reasons, we want to take them to that one program, right? That's going to help them get placed in a group and serving. And you've been through a few iterations of this program. Like when we first talked, you used to do like a 12 or 13 week thing. And then, for most recently, you've been doing a 4 week kind of like growth track. If people are familiar with that model, where, it's 4 weeks and each week's a different focus. You could kind of jump in any week if you wanted. But you had to adapt that online. There's some things you learned that as soon as you put that online, didn't work quite the same as it did in person, I would imagine. I think we've all experienced that. So tell us some of the things you've learned to make that same kind of thing work online like it did in person.
Well, here's a few things that we had built our physical next steps experience, which is a 4 week experience. Step 1's weekend 1 of the month. Step 2 is weekend 2, etc. Right? And it just rotates, so you can stop and start anytime. And that's been helpful for us. But when we went on online, especially at the beginning of the quarantine where you're online solely, you're not meeting physically at all, we had to make a shift from the roles that we built that experiences around. We had a physical host, and table host, and like a next step assistant that was passing out merchandise when people won prizes or would collect the data when people signed up or welcome them and hand them a backpack, do some of those things. Well, now we built it around a online host, who's there, the face on Zoom, and the table host became just discussion leaders that Zoom will break you into groups and they will lead the discussion. But the real secret sauce was the assistant, the next step assistant in the back of the room became the tech assistant, and it's their Zoom that we're using. They put up the videos with the teaching. They're taking role. They are the tech troubleshooter, so that if people have a technical problem, they just write it in the chat and it goes to him or her, and they fix the problem. So the host doesn't do anything but host. They're not doing anything technical at all. They're just logging in. And so that technical role caused so people with certain shapes for ministry to emerge and play at a high level in what we do. And so literally when we rolled it out with those 3 roles, we kind of did staff and interns the first month. Then we did half volunteers and staff the second month. And then ever since July 1, it's been all volunteer ran. And it's happening
awesome.
Online multiple times a weekend. And I'm not even there. I'm there in the video teaching, but that's it. So it's just really neat to see those roles and how important that shift was.
Yeah.
Another thing that we learned was to offer a consistent experience with each session. So we normally our next steps would be like an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes. We just decided to make it an hour online. And, especially as people have gotten Zoom fatigue, these kind of things. So we offered a consistent experience. And it's basically, if I was to break it down, it's like this: welcome as people are logging on for 5 minutes, maybe some, how'd you hear about us? How long have you been attending online? And just getting some buzz. And then next we do Zoom instructions, and the tech assistant will usually give those. And we'll give just some Zoom instructions. Use gallery mode. Make sure you put your real name and not Daffy Duck, and if there's 2 people there, put both their names, because that's how they're taking, stuff like that. A gamer activity, this is hugely important. We've done things like an at-home scavenger hunt, a name that tune. We offer now the Amazon gift card as a prize for the people who win those games. But those games always tie into the training of that month, and the smiles go so, you just watch the level of engagement when we do them. It's just great. And then we'll usually have maybe 2 videos that offer training and teaching on the topic. And then they're broken up in the middle with a large group discussion. Then the final video is finished with an ask of the week. We only ask for one thing each week. Step one in our case is, do you want to follow Jesus? And we have people make decisions, raise their hand. We have step two is to join a small group. Step three is to join a volunteer team. And step four is to get your feet wet in a compassion project locally or globally. And we have forms. So you just put the link in the chat and people fill out the forms with the host so that they see it. And we always put there, I'm not ready at this time. And that way everybody can fill out the form, even if they're not ready. And then we kick them for about 12 minutes or so into discussion groups at the end. And we've given them questions. They kind of process those things together in groups. And then they get sucked back into the main group, and they're given assignments for the week. And then we kick them one last time into their small group for their discussion leader to close in prayer. People can hang out for a while if they want. So, that's kind of the consistent experience piece. That's how we break down. That's the format of an online next step session. That was a little bit different and is a little bit different than our physical, but.
Yeah. What else have you learned that's been different,
Well, we learned to roll, this is kind of a little tactic, to roll it out with your staff first. In other words, if you're going to convert whatever you did before, some churches will call it starting point, next steps. So people, there's all kinds of phrases and programs that people will use for their one program. But if you're going to do the work to convert it online, roll it out with your staff first. And this is what we did, is we knew that the first weekend in May was our first next steps online. So the Wednesday before, we had all these staff, and I bet most of your listeners have staff in churches, particularly in family ministry, where you were hired to serve family ministry during church. So many of them don't get to go to church in the way that most people do. And since most of these programs for assimilation happen during church so that there's free childcare, right? Is that they've never been to your assimilation program. So there's stuff that they missed about the culture of the church, the vibe, the whole experience of connecting with people. And you have staff that, whether in family ministry or maybe in production and worship, that have not been able to attend. And so now they can. So we took all of those who had never attended Next Steps. They did it at noon on the Wednesday before. Well, it was, to our pleasant surprise, they loved it. We got experience wearing the suit, but they also were a great focus group to say, hey, what if you did this? Or, when you did this, I don't think it worked like you thought it did, or this happened. Did you realize that, or whatever? So it made us so good to do the one, the actual public one the following weekend. So I think rolling it out with your staff first is a real win.
Craig, let me jump in there for a second, because that reminds me of something. We put our, one program online too, and certainly there were some learnings there. And we did a test run with staff, just like you're talking about. And even after we did that, it is helpful because, if we've done it in person, all of us, you've done it and you've done it and done it. Like, you've learned the tricks and the trades and the gaps and the things you got to watch out for and be prepared for. But online, not necessarily. Like, if we haven't done it a bunch, and one random thing is, I actually was the tech person, so to speak, doing it one time recently because one of our staff people couldn't be there and I wanted to be a part of it. And I'm glad we test drove it even before that one call, because for whatever reason, sharing the one video crashed my Zoom every time. I had to restart my whole computer, and we figured that out beforehand. And so I didn't share it. The other person, the other staff person, they share. I did everything else. They shared that. It's just one of those things that, like, when you've done it in person 40 times or 400 times, you've kind of learned all the things, right? But then you go move online, and there's just nuance, like the games you're playing, what works, what doesn't. Right? The tech parts, what works, what doesn't. So that's really important. I think that's helpful.
Oh, we had the same thing happen that you did. So it's so great to have that happen when you're with staff, right? Just kind of doing this when it's game time with guests who are new to your church. So I totally, I'm with you that whole way. One of the other things that we learned was to make it easy to sign up or jump in, because there are some people, it's just personalities, and this in your church, whether it's physically meeting or online. There are some people that want to sign up, get their Zoom link, and they have it on their calendar, and there it is. There are other people that are going to make that decision spontaneously. So at the end of the service, jump into Next Steps. Go right now, click, go to eastside.com/next steps and just click and jump in. Now, I can't tell you the stats, but I know that when we were physically meeting, 2/3 of our attendance was spontaneous, 1/3 was pre-registered. So
which
the
shocks
majority
me.
of content, yeah.
As long as I've known you, I don't know, maybe a few years, I've always known about all your processes and the numbers, and then we've talked all those things. And when you hit me with that just a few weeks ago, I was like, wait a minute. 2/3 were spontaneous, not pre-registered. That was very interesting. And I think online it could be even more so, right? You know, because
I
you could,
think it could be. And again, I don't have the stats for what's happening online, but we offer both ways, you know, so making sure
yeah,
that people can either sign up or jump in, because different personalities will show up because of those opportunities.
yep,
Another one, a fifth one, is just remember that engagement is important when deciding on content. We are so ingrained in the class, you know, and you've been around me long enough, Nick, to know that one of my big sayings is that people don't want to come to our classes. They know it's the church's version of a timeshare presentation. They don't want to go. And they don't want to get trapped in that kind of a thing. And I don't think that they want to get trapped in a Zoom thing where they're going to be asked something maybe that they're uncomfortable deciding or doing, or they don't want
yeah,
that. And they know that their impression of church is they're going to ask me to join the church or ask me to give money or whatever. And it just, and so engagement is that from the get-go, there's just warmness, there's conversation. It's, we keep wanting to make classes, so we keep on thinking, okay, online, do we want to walk them through our statement of faith line by line? We probably need to do that. Should we talk about our 5 most important doctrines or teachings at our church? They don't care. They don't care. You could teach those to them, and when they're in a small group, that's a much
yeah,
better and effective environment for them to process truth there. But the most important thing is engage them, get them connected, make them feel like this, God's doing something great and he's speaking to them and he's using your community to do it. And so that takes conversation. Sometimes it takes an activity or a game. Sometimes it takes an ask that also has an opt-out on it, clearly, you know what I mean? But just whatever it is, have them do stuff. You need to spend as much time thinking, how are we going to engage them in two-way activity as we are, what truths are we communicating to them right now? So engagement is important when deciding on content online. The 6 is film in-depth training or teaching components to be shown as videos. In other words, don't make the host live on Zoom do the teaching. I think this whole thing works best, by the way, even physically, when you don't have a teacher leading your one program. Many times they'll kill it by accident because we don't need, it's not the teaching. They need somebody who has that woo factor. Remember woo on Strength Finders, you know, winning others over? It's
yep,
high trust. Like, I like this guy or I like this gal, and I trust what they're saying to me. In fact, tell me more. And they're more of a host. Think hospitality versus teacher. And so just somebody who makes you feel so welcome, you just want to hang out and have coffee and talk with them. That's just what you want to do. And so what that means is you could take the training and teaching components, give it to your best teachers, your best ones, and your best videographers, and make it go alpha on it. That's what we're doing. We're shooting everything, and we're making next steps alpha style videos, because we just love alpha videos where they're on location somewhere and they're going back and forth in a
yeah,
conversation, no talking heads, right?
yeah,
Like we're doing right now. And just do the best videos. And what we found that this builds a bridge back to, as we physically regather, is that you now have a more franchisable version of your one program that people can use who aren't teachers at campuses you might launch. It's plug and play now, because you can actually show these short videos from the 1-hour online sessions, and then the rest of it you can plug back in, an actual physical activity, lots of great discussion at the tables and everything, and a great host up front. But you've made the teaching as high quality, and you've taken the burden of being a dynamic spiritual truth teacher off the host and let them shine as a welcomer and a connector. So I just think
yeah.
taking advantage of the video teaching is important. What do you
It's
think?
also more scalable too, right? Like, because you can
Yes.
run more of those classes online, whatever you want to call them, because the same teacher doesn't have to show up to all of them. So you've empowered volunteers. Well, part of the reason it works is because the volunteers don't have to teach the content. They just hit play on a video, right?
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
And the last thing is, again, a practice that worked real well. And we didn't do this when we gathered physically, and we probably should have, but for Zoom, we just felt we had to, is that we huddle with the volunteers that are part of this program 15 minutes prior to the session. So say say that there's next steps at 10 a.m. They would all log into Zoom at 9:45. Our tech assistant usually would say, hey, discussion leaders, here's the questions. Remember, this is our one ask of them today. How's everybody doing? We'll catch up and laugh with each other. And then we'll say a prayer for God to use that time and inhabit that digital space. And it just makes sure that everybody's there on time, A. B, everybody's got what, if they have any questions, wait, should we ask this, or what happens if this happens? You know, all this stuff, that it all gets answered. And then that when you're done with that 15-minute, you know, huddle, that these people are just locked and ready. They're prayed up, their questions are answered, nobody's popping in later. And you also, you know, here's another benefit of Zoom that I didn't expect. When you have one program and you have 2 or 3 people show up, doesn't it feel a little bit like a bummer when you're in?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And you have 2 tables set up and you're ready for maybe 14 people, maybe 12 people and 2 table hosts or something. And you have like 3 people show up and you're like, oh, what do we do? You know, and you make do and you know, whatever. But on Zoom, you have a host, you have a tech host, you have a couple discussion leaders, and 3 people show up. That's 7 squares. It feels good.
Yeah, we just had one like that. We had 10 registered to let us know they weren't coming. 4 didn't tell us they weren't coming, and we had 4. And it was great. We had 7 or 8, I think, total on screen.
Yeah, and that feels full on Zoom where it wouldn't in a physical room, depending on how it's set up. So I just think that huddling that 15 minutes prior to it just makes sure that when everybody's on, the squares are there. You know, there's faces and squares, and it just feels good. It just does. So those are some of the. You know, I'd add this one spontaneously. Is the first time we went through it, not the one with the staff, but the first month that we went through it publicly, we just recorded all the Zooms. And what did that enable us to do? That when we recruited and trained new hosts, we gave them the script and gave them the Zoom video, and they could watch it being done. And that just made them so much better when they came on and tried their first time, and we observed them hosting Next Steps Online. So when you're able to just press record on a Zoom, you actually have a video of every session you do to use to train other people. And it really works out well. So I don't know, those are some of the learnings that have come our way in adapting all of these guest connection strategies to the online world. And they'll continue because the online world's not going away. We're just gonna get better and better at it, you know?
Exactly, we've got to be able to do both, right? In person and online. And I think a lot of the points you shared here about how to make that online experience better are really good, and they translate to other things too, because it might not just be our next steps. It might be a small group about this, or FPU class, like you mentioned, that takes place online. There's like some of those principles transfer there too. Well, I love that. I love getting to talk to you anytime about this. You know, I love talking about the assimilation and your experience with it. And I feel like you guys, one time, was it maybe a couple of years ago? I think, you know, you got me connected to somebody in your church that manages like the church management system. And I really dug into the numbers just to be able to compare apples to apples. And what I already thought was true is true. You guys were connecting people at a pretty high rate, regardless of church size, regardless of how you do it. You're connecting people at a high rate. So I love that you share some of this with us. And I want to encourage people to check out both the way you do base camps, where you help other churches, you know, build their own assimilation strategy, as well as your course, Climbing the Assimilators. So tell us a little bit about both of those.
Yeah, that phrase might sound a little quirky, climbing the Assimilators. And the idea is that connecting these days, and it has been this way in church for a while, we all think we're friendly churches, so we think it's easy to connect with us. But I guess connecting to our church communities is not a coast, it's a climb. And they need a Sherpa to guide them to reach that summit of full connection. So we talk about being a Sherpa leader. And so our whole approach is called Climbing the Assimilators. And my URL is gregcurtis-assimilation.com. And that's the Climbing the Assimilators website. There's a few things there. There's posts that I post, you know, a few times a month, 2 to 4 times. Just what am I learning now? In fact, I was reading my notes off of posts on my website right now to make sure that I was covering things for you guys, for your audience well. Yeah. So that's all up there. We also have, like you mentioned, base camps that will come and work with the entire church staff and key volunteers for 2 days. and help and leave them with an assimilation strategy that I'll work with them in the following months to do. And there's a way on my website, you just click at the top, experience a base camp. You can send me some info. I'll get you some info. I've just started doing those on Zoom too. So now we have that option. Also, I have the most commonly thing that people grab hold of and run with and use is my Climbing the Assimilators video course, which it's a 6-session course that brings you through, and you can do it with your team. It's got questions and exercises to do, but it brings you through kind of a vision of spiritual formation, how it really works, and what the role of assimilation and those 4 Ps we talked about, how that fits in. And then it's got a session on processes and metrics. What do you need to measure to know that you're doing well? And how do you know where you're currently at? And then the last 4 is how to do a one place, how to do a one program, how to build a small group placement process, how to build a volunteer placement process. And that is really, really doing well. I've got from all over the world, people have bought that course and are using it. I just had somebody in Africa tell me how they're using it. I just can't even.
That's awesome. That's great.
Just about 3 weeks ago. And so when they do that, I am now adding to it all of the online learning so that if you already have it, it's free. It'll be added into it. But for the same price, for those who have had, who are looking for a course like that to bring their teams through with exercises, and it has checklists, everything, that this will also have application to the online post-COVID world and the new normal that we're all heading towards and living in.
Yeah, which is great. And I love that you're adding that stuff in there. That'd be really helpful because we all got to figure out how to not just connect guests in person, but online and both. How do we do both? And you can maybe weave from doing that online till you did that in person to back to that online. Like that's where we need to be as churches. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So thanks for taking the time to talk through this with us, sharing these frameworks. I encourage people to check out your site and the course and maybe consider doing a base camp, all that stuff. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, it was great hanging with you, Nick. See ya.